Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com, has the Phillies Mailbag, and it's the first regular season edition of the Mailbag, and we've already got questions that need to be answered. The listeners have questions at Frank Klose on Twitter. That's Klose with a K, or at sportstalkphilly@gmail.com to get your question answered during the Mailbag. And welcome back, Frank. In Game 1, we already have a potential closer controversy. Yes, we got a save, but do you think that Jeanmar Gomez will hold on to his job? It kind of ties into Sean's question about Hector Neris. He wants to know, will Neris be the closer by the end of the year? How about by the end of the week?
Yeah, I think people are a little overreacting here. Jeanmar Gomez, he has a pretty long track record of being just a very steady hand. He never really blows up like you want your closer to do. And as I think I said with you guys last week, he's the type of guy that for every three innings he pitches, he gives up one run on average. So he gave up a couple runs yesterday. I don't think that's reason to panic just yet. He did leak some oil at the end of last year, so I think people might be a little bit worried. But in terms of somebody like Neris, I think the Phillies would prefer not to set him as a closer yet. I think they would rather let Neris be a very good setup man. And if you look at his numbers last year, he struck out 11.4 batters per 9 innings, which is a pretty fascinating number. That's something you often give to a closer's job, when somebody's putting up numbers like that. But I think they want to make a long-term decision there. So they might be a little hesitant to put somebody like him into the fold right away. So I think if the Phillies had to replace Jeanmar Gomez at some point, I think Joaquin Benoit would be the first person they go to. Now, Benoit, he looked pretty good yesterday. He's up there in years, but he still throws pretty well, and he has experience. He was the Tigers closer in the past and performed very, very well. So I think that they would go that route, but I still think it's a little too soon to panic. And Scooter Gennett, he's somebody who's always been really pesky to the Phillies, and for a guy like him, that was his first game playing for his hometown team, and I'm sure he's going to have a great story to tell someday that he homered in his first game playing in his hometown. So good for him, but I don't think it's something worth panicking about too much. And really, I think long term, closer position might be the one where the Phillies spend some money. So, I don't think they want to necessarily throw somebody like Neris in only to take it away from him. I don't know if that serves any purpose. So I think they want a clearer long-term picture before they would, officially anoint Neris as a closer. But at the same time, I don't think they're going to worry about throwing him in there once in a while in the ninth inning as well.
Now, Pete Mackanin did express some concern. He admitted that he was concerned about Gomez. I mean, he said that, last year that he was kind of, that he's not getting the ball down the way he did when he was successful. So it is certainly on Mackanin's radar, though, right?
Yeah, but at the same time, Mackanin wasn't that worried about it. He said that was something that he's not thinking about just yet. So, and really something like that could be a simple mechanical adjustment. But there's at least it doesn't look like there's any signs of a major injury or anything. So I think they go forward with Gomez for a little while and see what happens. I mean, they're not in a win now panic situation. So I think they have the ability to let things play out.
Talk with Frank Klose, 97.3 ESPN.com. Phillies Mailbag here, and then a second question today comes from Ed, and he wants to know, really, if someone gets hurt in this rotation, Zach Eflin, by the way, he was a guy who was up last year. He's already on the DL, but if somebody was to get hurt to start the season, who's next man up in that rotation?
Well, they're in a lot better situation than they were last year. The Phillies got 4 starts out of Charlie Morton before they had to go pull Adam Morgan, and after that the depth just dropped right off. And but this year I think the Phillies have the experience from Thompson and Eflin that they have stacked at AAA. That will be the first 2 guys they go to. You mentioned Eflin being on the disabled list. He's almost ready though. Towards the end of spring training he was making minor league starts. He didn't pitch in a Grapefruit League game, but he had some knee surgery this offseason to correct a problem that Eflin has pretty much battled his whole career. So they knew he'd be a little bit behind, but he's really not majorly behind at this point. So I think when the AAA season opens, you're going to see Jake Thompson as kind of their first guy. And Eflin probably will be activated and optioned to AAA not too long from now. I wouldn't expect it to be more than a couple weeks, and then he would be the next guy probably. But at the same time, you have guys like Mark Appel and Ben Lively and Nick Pivetta that are all lurking at AAA. You know what? If one of those guys is really stepping up, really it could be anybody. I mean, for the first time in a while, the Phillies are going to feel really comfortable dipping into that depth when they absolutely need somebody. And you hope it doesn't happen sooner than later if you're the Phillies, but you never know. Charlie Morton just one little jog to first base was enough to really end his season last year. So Thompson, I think, is your first guy, and then after that, Eflin, and then luckily they still have more depth beyond that.
Frank Klose is with us. The Phillies mailbag is open. And Frank, the next question is from Mike, who wants to know, why would the Phillies let Tyler Goeddel go after keeping him on the big league roster all of last season?
Yeah, that's something that's a little tough. When you take a Rule 5 player and you're that committed to keeping him on the roster. Now they didn't lose anybody major along the way, but they could have protected one more of their prospects this offseason instead of keeping him around. So they only lost Severino Gonzalez really since the offseason began. So they didn't lose a whole lot by keeping Goeddel around. But the reason the Phillies went with Goeddel over Luis Garcia, who is the one I frequently mentioned as the one who could lose his roster spot, is that the Phillies feel like they need to have somebody at AAA who they can call up in either in an injury, or if somebody is getting shelled in the early going in the Phillies bullpen, he would be a guy that they could easily swap out. The Phillies would not have had any other relievers on the 40-man roster if they had not kept Garcia. They could have easily tried to walk the line for a while, and if Goeddel went down, they could go to somebody like Colton Murray, who had a nice spring, and they have Michael Marriott down there too, who has a decent amount of big league experience, but they felt Garcia would be the one who would better serve the team by being somebody who can kind of go back and forth between AAA and the majors if necessary this year. And in terms of Goeddel, he's in that DFA limbo, as a lot of people like to call it, where they're still in that 10-day window where they can either make a trade with him, or they could try to slip him through waivers, or they could outright release him. Now, I think the Phillies might be hoping that because the season just began and everybody just set their rosters, that they might be able to slip them through waivers. Maybe there's not a team out there who can find room on their roster for somebody like Goeddel. And remember, Goeddel is already optioned to the minor leagues. Whoever claims him is under no obligation to bring him to the major leagues. So there might be a team out there that wants to claim him and just stash him in the minor leagues for later. But if you're one of those teams that has interest in him, you might just wait for him to be on waivers instead of trading for him. So I think there's a good chance he gets claimed along the way by somebody. I guess there's an outside chance that he could slip through, but this year, and they picked up Goeddel. He was kind of the consensus first overall pick in that Rule 5 draft, and I'm sure that a lot of teams out there who were interested in making a Rule 5 pick had Goeddel on their radar then. So there might be enough teams out there that are familiar enough with Goeddel that one of them claims him. But you never know. Somebody might make a trade, and you might get something very marginal back in return. But the Phillies just had so much outfield depth that he was buried at Double-A anyway. So, you really weren't doing Goeddel any favors, and really he wasn't doing anything for the organization later, though you hate to see talent just go away without any return.
Frank Klose is with us. We're talking Phillies baseball. And as far as yesterday's game goes, Frank, if I told you that Tommy Joseph and Cameron Rupp would go a combined 0 for 8 and 4 strikeouts, keeping in mind that these were two guys who were keys for their offense last year, you might think the picture was bleak, right? But what does it say about the middle of the order that the Phillies were able to not only win the game, but do it while collecting a lot of extra base hits?
Well, it's a really good sign that your number 3 hitter, who is Odubel Herrera now, he got on base 3 different times, with 1 hit and 2 walks. And Howie Kendrick, he had 3 hits. And Cesar Hernandez, he had that leadoff home run. But, if it's a 2 and 3 hole guys, or even the number 1 hitter, now Hernandez was just that home run and that's it. But, if those guys are getting up when Maikel Franco comes to the plate, there's a good chance things will happen along the way. So Franco had his one hit, and Saunders just barely missed a home run. So, there's a lot more names that are in this lineup this year compared to last year because, last year if Joseph and Rupp weren't providing the offense, then behind him, you conceivably had David Lowe, Peter Borges, Manny Burris, and the pitcher all in a row. So it's nice that there is a little bit more talent in the lineup this year. Freddie Galvis is your 8-hole hitter this year. You're not counting on Freddie Galvis to try to be a 2-hole hitter, which he's not, or putting him some other place where he does not belong. So it really does help balance things. So having Galvis at the end of the lineup, and he's got speed, so some things can happen, and you never know. Maybe your pitcher will hit a triple.
He says, I'm never doing that again.
Right, he was huffing and puffing.
Last one, Frank Klose with us here, 97.3ESPN.com. Don't forget the mailbag every Tuesday, and send us your questions at Frank Klose with a K, so you can get your question answered during the Phillies mailbag segment, and you can listen to it every Tuesday online at 97.3ESPN.com. The interesting thing, we talked about closers, but, Frank, how about the Phillies bullpen? I mean, they now have the makings of one of those situations where the pitcher really needs to get through 5 or 6 innings, and they've got guys slotted that are legit, bullpen arms now, as opposed to some years past where you really had to get to that 8th or 9th inning to think you had a shot in a game. They're pretty good in the 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Yeah, much improved over last year. And, Pete Mackanin pulled Jeremy Hellickson after just, 67 pitches? Or, 67, I believe. So, you'd like to see Hellickson stay in a little bit longer. He seems to worry Mackanin for some reason. I think he must have a telltale sign where Mackanin feels like he needs to pull him when he sees something each time. But, yeah, ideally you want your starters to go at least 6. Hopefully some of them go 7. But yeah, there really isn't like last year where you have to you basically just went through like a turnstile and reliever after reliever, not getting anybody out. And it's kind of funny. Opening day last year was also Hellickson, also in Cincinnati, and we saw that bullpen come in and just give away a game that they very well could have won. And here, even though Jeanmar Gomez gave up a couple of runs there, it just felt a lot more secure. Nobody was. You didn't really feel a sense of panic among Phillies fans, that you might have seen in the past. So, I think Benoit and Neshek, who didn't get the pitch yesterday, that's actually pretty interesting to think about too. Is that Pat Neshek didn't even make an appearance, and he's a steady arm in the bullpen.
Yeah.
So, when you start getting into days off, you feel a lot better about who's behind your starters. And the Phillies starters that they do have the potential to give you 6 or more innings a lot of the time. So it's just a matter of seeing if Vince Velasquez can be very consistent and not waste a lot of pitches. This could have the makings of a very solid game where the offense can win a lot of games for them.
All right, Frank, of course, the mailbag every Tuesday right here on 97.3 ESPN. You can read it and listen to it online at 97.3ESPN.com. Frank Klose, guys, here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. And don't forget, check out all of the guys at sportstalkphilly.com. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, guys.